Here are the topics that will be covered in the US election process revision videos. This particular video is going to focus on how vice presidential candidates are selected.
Up until 1980, the running mate was always chosen and announced during the National Party Convention. Between 1960 and 1980, the presidential candidate themselves made the selection and merely announced it during the convention. This was traditionally done on the third day of proceedings, just before the presidential candidate delivered their own acceptance speech. However, since 1984, when Democratic candidate Mondale announced his selection of New York Congresswoman Geraldine Ferrario as his running mate 4 days before the convention, all Democratic presidential nominees have announced their vice presidential candidate ahead of the party convention. Since 1986, Republicans have also made their announcement before party convention. Both running mates of 2016, Republican Mike Pence and Democrat Tim Kaine, were announced 3 days before the party convention. There are 3 strategies for picking a vice presidential candidate. You choose for a balanced ticket, potential in government, or party unity. We need to know these strategies in depth, so let's start with a balanced ticket. This strategy is a pairing of presidential and vice presidential candidates on a ticket who will attract support for different reasons. This means that they are appealing to the broadest amount of voters. Balance might be looked at in terms of geographic region, political experience, age, ideology, or maybe even gender, race, and religion. There are many pros and cons to this particular strategy. The pros are that balance brings more attraction to voters. For example, Barack Obama and his running mate, Senator Joe Biden of Delaware, brought political experience and a balance of race. Biden was 65 years old and had more years in the Senate compared to Obama. Biden also brought significant foreign policy expertise, having served as a chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. There are also cons for this. However, using this strategy can lead to difficulties later down the line, as if the presidential candidate is successful, they also need to find someone who is the best fit for helping them run the country.
The second strategy for picking a vice presidential candidate is to consider their potential in government. This strategy is about the focus being on the governing rather than campaigning. This strategy was adopted by Governor George W. Bush in 2000 when he chose Dick Cheney to be his vice president. This can be seen as a pro because Bush had no Washington experience at all. His choice of Cheney as to be his running mate was to be made with an eye to what he could do if he won the election, and he was someone who would help him run the White House and the whole executive branch of federal government. Cheney had served as both White House Chief of Staff to President Ford and Secretary of Defense to Bush's father. A con of this particular strategy, however, is that in using it, you could put the success of the presidential candidate at risk, as they might not have the broadest appeal to voters during the election campaign. A third possible strategy in the vice presidential selection is to promote party unity, but this is rarely adopted. One way of reuniting the party after the primaries is for the eventual nominee to choose one of his former rivals as their running mate. This was adopted by Ronald Reagan in choosing George H.W. Bush in 1980. Bush had been Reagan's principal rival in the Republican primaries, and by choosing him as the number 2 on the ticket, Reagan reunited the party. Had Obama adopted this strategy in 2008, he would have chosen Hillary Clinton as his running mate, and Trump would have chosen Ted Cruz in the 2016 election. The problem with this strategy is that the former people are rivals, and they are often quite incompatible politically with one another, and they have said harsh things about each other during the primaries.